Hello, Tyrone TG3 here. Poke the Monster. Horizons. Episode 78 and 79. These episodes are titled A Fierce Fight Against Entei, the Noble Roar of Flame. And episode 79 is Over the Top. Okay, so I chose to review these two. I chose to review these two episodes mostly because they lead into the Area Zero stuff. And I wanted to go ahead and review the Area Zero stuff in one nice little compartment. Technically, Over the Top is kind of like glued to Area Zero, but I didn't want to do it. Just because these two in chunks are fine, and then I'm going to cover the Area Zero stuff. And then I'll also cover the Rakua stuff. Yes, I know of the Rakua stuff. Although I don't think it's fair to review all of the Rakua stuff right now, because technically it's not over. Or at least at the time of this recording, it's not over. And it won't really be until the Friday of that week. So we're definitely getting close. The main goal here was to obviously catch up. So by the time you see this review, it'll more than likely be on Monday or Tuesday. I'm sorry. It'll more than likely be on Tuesday, which means the next set will be on Wednesday. And then that'll pretty much take care of that, because I'm going to do all of Rakua in one go. Yeah, I feel like that's the best route to go with this, is to do all of Rakua and one space. And I know that I want to cover two more episodes, and then like episode 85, 86, 87, 88, and 89. I think I'm going to do all of that in a nice, like I'll do all of that in a nice chunk. I'm going to do all of those episodes together in a nice chunk. So you'll get some content from this, and then obviously there's some stuff later. But I'm revealing some too much behind the curtain stuff. So let's just go ahead and review the episodes at hand and get to it. So, episode 78 is pretty much the episode where we learn that from Olivine, from the last episode, the old man states that a couple of islands from north from where they are, near the World Islands, he says that somebody saw Entei when they went up on a boat. So apparently they rented a boat, went up north, and said they saw Entei. So that was kind of cool. So that obviously leads the Rising Volt Tacklers to that area. So they all hop aboard and head towards that space. We see that Liko, Roy, Dot, and Freed this time are all joining in and looking for Entei. While they're there, they notice that a volcano has emerged from the waters. Essentially, that means a new island is waking. And it's actually fun because they pay attention to the lore. The lore here is that when Entei howls, or when Entei barks, the islands rise, a volcano rises. And that's necessary because Suikun's water cools the volcano, making the land area. And then Raiko's there. No, but like the tides and the storm and the current and everything changes due to the electricity. Stuff like that. It's basically the same thing as in Pokemon Movie 2000, where fire and ice make the water, and then lightning disrupts the currents and stuff. Stuff like that. Anyway, when Entei arrives via battle cry, our heroes pretty much just jumping straight into the fight. I will say this, for several episodes from now, like, we're just going to be getting fights. Like, for some reason, Pokemon Horizons decided to just slip on its bootstraps and get fights. Like, literally just battle after battle. I'm actually a little concerned. We get like a little bit of reprieve from it, but it's mostly just hands. It's all hands, almost back to back in some situations. It's kind of crazy. It is actually wild how many fights happen in a row. And they're all evolving like the same characters. Liko, Roy, Dot, Freed. Mostly. So anyway, Entei just wants to scrap. No reaction from the ancient Pokeballs. No reaction from Terapagos. They just assume that they need to throw hands with Entei, so they run the fade. We got Florgato, Quaxwell, Crocolore, Pikachu, the usuals. My issue is I wish they would divvy it up sometimes. I wish on like stuff like this, because we like, for those of y'all who are watching this by this point, you probably know the ending result of this, but sadly, I wish they would divvy it up. I wish the same Pokemon weren't always fighting. But they mostly just use the Paldean starters plus Captain Pikachu. The fight is intense too. Like Entei is kind of rocking him. Entei's rocking him. He's using Sacred Fire. He's using Pressure. Yeah, they actually talk about the ability Pressure. Entei's like using several attacks. He's dodging a lot of attacks. They need to find an opening in order to beat Entei. Dot's over here making the plans. I love that Dot has become the strategist in these. Even though Freed is clearly like more experienced than the other three kids, he kind of lets Dot just be the master strategist. And I like that. I do like that. And so Dot is like calculating, okay, this is Entei's weaknesses. This is what we can do. This is what happens when we get in close. And I like that while they're fighting, Entei's literally dodging every stomping tantrum attack. Entei's using Sacred Fire to match up against certain attacks and blow them away. Florgato can't be much used because it's the grass type, so it mostly serves as support. And I like that too, even though Lico's the main character. And a lot of these fights, since grass Pokemon are not very effective, she mostly serves as support instead of like physical attack. They actually go to like find out which weaknesses work for which Pokemon, and that decides. I love it. The Pokemon has never really done this before. Most of the battles in the Ash series have mostly involved Ash versus someone, with his friends mostly serving as support or only fighting when it's absolutely necessary, or if the episode is centered around them. So most of the fights we get, Ash is doing the heavy lifting, with the background characters maybe throwing in Pokemon here and there when it's necessary. In this situation, we have them all working as a team. Ash has worked as a team with his friends before, but never like this. Never in this like calculated coordination where everybody has to, like, you've got your supports, you've got hell, when Lico uses Hatchrim, you got your healer, like you got this weird little, almost like Overwatch / Marvel Rivals situation. You got your DPS, you got your tank. I'm like, this is actually pretty impressive. You can see that they have experience not only fighting together now, their Pokemon are stronger now, and they actually have roles in the fight. And that's something we really don't see a lot of in Pokemon. We got Dot coordinating which Pokemon are weak against what and how to fight them, which long range or short range attacks to use. Like, I honestly respect it. So in the fight, Captain Pikachu basically risked his life several times in order to save Crocolore and get in. But that's because Crocolore can use Stomping Tantrum and Quaxwell can use Aqua Cutter and Aqua Break. So the two come in and use their attacks to whittle Entei down. Florgato comes in mostly as support in order to stall it out. But then afterwards, we see the Stomping Tantrum fails, but they failed it on purpose so that the Stomping Tantrum can get stronger and do more damage. It's honestly really impressive. Like, they really go in, and Entei eventually does end up losing. But when Entei loses, it's like, it doesn't get knocked out or anything. Entei just goes, okay. And then Entei mostly gets with Raikou and Suicune afterwards, and they show up. And when they show up, they're mostly showing up because the new island has, like, arisen. So now that the new island has arisen, they scatter out. And they basically know, okay, it's very clear Entei wasn't it. Or at least this Entei. And this Pokemon pretty much confirming, yes, there can be multiple copies of legendary Pokemon, which we kind of knew a little bit. But Pokemon, at least as far as the anime goes, was always vague about this theory of them being more than one legendary. So now we pretty much get confirmation because they mention it's not that Entei. So that means there's probably more than one Entei. But they also learned some data. Once they learn some data from Miss Briar when they head back to the ship, Miss Briar contacts them and says, hey, Area 0 spotted an Entei here. And I heard you guys were looking for an Entei. So we saw an Entei on our security cameras in Area 0. I'm going to go do some research down there to check it out. Guys, come along with me. And that leads us to our next episode, which is Over the Top. Once they describe this to Chairman Geeta, Geeta is like, yo, Freed, you can go to Area Zero. The kids cannot. And then Freed requests that they go, and Geeta goes, bet, I can bring them in if they can beat me in a Pokemon battle. And this is where we get, honestly, one of the most controversial episodes in Pokemon Horizon's history up to this point. At least during the time that this episode did take place. The week this episode happened was very chaotic. Just only because we'll cut to the end just to get to the point. Geeta loses the fight. All right, let's cut straight to the point and go to the middle. Geeta loses. Now, a lot of people feel a certain way about this because, well, she's the champion. So people go, oh crap, Geeta lost? Does that make Liko the champion? Are they all on champion level now? All these mid-evolution Pokemon beating a champion? They just solo dipped a champion? It's a lot. It's what I always state in my Dragon Ball Daima reviews. They are the power scalers. Power scalers don't really look at like context, they look at results. And the result is that Liko won. But let's see exactly what happens. Now, in the fight, Geeta says her famous video game line. Once I battle, I absolutely cannot hold back. We can tell immediately that's a lie. It's a lie because the battle she chooses, the Pokemon she chooses in the battle are so very clearly not serious. The Pokemon she winds up using are 2 Glimmets, yes, tiny little baby Glimmets, and a Glamora. And honestly, I don't even think this is her Glamora. I think this is some Glamora she wound up picking up at Area Zero. The reason I say that is because when she chooses those Pokemon, she says, these are the Pokemon you'll be fighting in Area Zero. She makes it very weirdly specific that she says that. Why did they put that line in if it doesn't have any level of importance? Glamora is one of the Pokemon that Geeta owns. And yes, it's true that it's also in Area Zero. But why would Geeta specifically use a Glamora and 2 Glimmets? Why not use her King Gambit? Why not use her Go-Go? Why not use her other fully evolved Pokemon? Why not Espathra? Why specifically Glamora and its 2 baby forms? Why them? Why not much stronger Pokemon? And why specifically Glamora and not a Pokemon that would have definitely been stronger as a base? Glamora is mostly meant to be a starting Pokemon that starts your team up and does build up for the team so that the rest of the team can whittle you down while its poison takes effect. But for some reason, she uses that first. And it's odd to me why that's the case. And then in the fight, when she's fighting against him, she has a combo where the Glimmets essentially use attacks while Glamora ends up basically using Flash in order to blind the opponents so that they can get hit by like Dazzling Gleam and smaller moves. And this happens continuously until Dot is able to help find a strategy to get them around. Geeta pretty much can find a defensive counter for everything that Dot, Liko, and Roy do. So Liko comes up with an idea where she goes, okay, I gotta stop fighting like myself. Because Chairman Geeta has watched them all fight too. So she knows their fighting styles. So she goes, okay, if we're gonna win, I gotta stop fighting like me and start fighting in a way that's a surprise to everybody. And one of the things she winds up doing is having Florgato use Sucker Punch. But she has Florgato use Sucker Punch on Crocolore. The reason she does that is because Crocolore is about to use Stomping Tantrum. She disrupts the Stomping Tantrum and ends up taking hits from Glamora so that Crocolore doesn't get hurt. But this is a good strategy because Crocolore is now able to use a stronger version of Stomping Tantrum because she disrupted the first Stomping Tantrum. That means Stomping Tantrum does double damage. And it means it does even more double damage because not only is it a ground type move, that means it has a quadruple effectiveness against poison and rock. meaning Glamour's taking a ton of damage. And yes, the characters in the back or the characters that are currently battling make it an effort now to say super effective. They also say not very effective in fights too. Hell, sometimes they say barely effective, referring to when an attack is quadruple not effective, like when Florgato uses a move on a dragon slash fire type Pokemon later on. It's barely effective because and not only is fire resistant to grass, dragon's resistant to grass. So it's a quadruple resistant. And they openly say these phrases now, much like the video game would say them. So that's interesting. The two Glimmets wind up using Parting Shot. Now, Parting Shot makes both Quaxwell and Crocalor weaker. And she did that on purpose because Crocalor and Quaxwell are technically the two biggest problems in the room. Water's good against rock. Ground from Crocalor is good against poison. The two combined means it's a problem. So she makes those two intentionally weaker. And the Glimmets get knocked out in the process. Now, if we had stretched the fight out longer, I guarantee you, if she never used Parting Shot and the Glimmets just stayed active, Geeta probably would have just won out of attrition. She used the Parting Shot to go ahead and knock out the other two Pokemon so that she can just fight with Glamora. And the other thing I want to say is that Geeta is fighting against three Pokemon and three trainers. The reason that's important is because while the trainers only really have to worry about commanding just their one Pokemon, Geeta has to command both Glimmets and Glamora. For a trainer, no matter how good you are, that's taxing to give three commands at once in the middle of a battle for each Pokemon. Glimmet 1, use this. Glimmet 2, use this. Glamora, use this. Glimmet 1, keep using this. Glimmet 1, defend yourself with this. Glamora, you gotta dodge this. Like, those are three different things, and your brain has to focus on three things. Whereas Liko, Dot, and Roy only really have to focus on their Pokemon. Occasionally swapping information and ideas with each other, but that's about it. Where Glamora, Geeta, and then the other two Glimmets, they don't have the luxury of teamwork. So obviously that's a factor in the fight. So when people get mad at it, they also got to realize Geeta's fighting three trainers at once, and she's fighting three trainers at once that all are working in tandem. They're working as a strategy. They're working as a team. Geeta is using new freshly caught Pokemon and controlling all three of them off rip. The fact that she's able to even knock out pretty much most of this team in general is nothing short of a miracle. Crocalor and Quaxwell get weakened in the fight, and then later their attacks aren't doing as much damage, so Glamora mostly just knocks the two out, with leaving Florgato as the only one. Geeta also winds up using Terastallization, but this technically works against her, because Glamora is now a pure rock type, meaning it no longer has a resistance to grass typing, meaning that grass type doesn't do normal damage anymore, it's weak against grass type Pokemon. Liko terrestrializes as well in order to make Florgato even stronger. The grass typing plus the terrestrialization of the grass typing, the stab, the ability overgrow, tack all these things together, and then when the two attacks collide, Power Gem versus, Terra Blast? Terra Blast versus Magical Leaf. Magical Leaf ultimately wins the power struggle, and Liko wins the fight. It's not that big of a deal that most people are making it. I think it's unfortunately just Geeta has had a very bad track record of being a champion that is more or less very easy to fight, and that's Scarlet and Violet's fault, because upon initial release they gave Geeta a very messed up order of team. Like, they put her Pokemon in all the wrong orders. She hypes herself up a lot but doesn't really deliver or contribute to the story much. Unfortunately that she just got a bad rap from there, so her losing to Liko, Dot, and Roy didn't exactly do her much favors. And it also doesn't do much favors that Pokemon Horizons is very stubborn about evolving Florgato, Crocalor, and Quaxwell. So from a visual perspective with no context, I can understand that it does look rather jarring that a champion and their ace Pokemon is losing to essentially what's a bunch of kids. But if you layer it out a little bit and dig into the nuance of the fight, it's not that bad. realistically, Geeta's testing them in order to make sure that they can hold their own. She already knew that they would be with Freed at some point, so they were already rest assured some protection, but she just wanted to make sure that they could pretty much watch their backs. So it's not that big of a deal. Honestly, I think a lot of people are just very angry because, again, power scaling can mess up things. And when you also post that victory out of context, because most people, when I saw the battle on Twitter, at least, it was mostly literally the butt end of the fight, the part where Liko wins. And without context, sharing that with a bunch of people on Twitter, especially people on Twitter who've never watched Pokemon Horizons, or at least didn't watch that episode of Pokemon Horizons, I can definitely tell it would raise a couple of eyebrows. And then obviously you take that and compare it to the previous Pokemon series, the one with Ash in it, and how hard champions went during those series, with the most similar of this being with Ash versus Diantha and X and Y. I see that when you tack all of that up, people are very quick to try to get very flustered at the struggle of the high standards that they hold champions to. Because that's realistically what it is. A champion, no matter if they're in the video games or in the anime, is always held to a very extremely high standard, mostly because they're the champion. They're supposed to be essentially almost the final boss in every game or region that they respectively are in. They are the end to the end. They are the Omega, the Alpha. They are the strongest. So realistically, you expect them to perform as such. Liko, Roy, and Dot have definitely gotten stronger, but nobody off face value believes that they're strong enough in order to fight essentially who's supposed to be the strongest in that series, or at least in Paldea. But again, if you peel apart the layers, actually dissect it and break it down, put in all factors, and realize that she freaking used 2 baby Glaments, you gotta really look at it and go, okay, it's very clear here. Geeta's not taking this fight seriously. I think when she says she can't hold back, one, it was mostly as a mind game to scare the kids, and two, Geeta probably said that also as a way of showing that, yes, she did fight her hardest, but she's fighting her hardest with what she's got. And what she's got is a freshly caught Glamora that's not really capable of doing the same thing that would say her ace Glamora can do, or any of the members of her team for that matter. She chose a very defensive, not very offensive Pokemon to fight with. She didn't use King Gambit, she didn't use Espathra, she didn't use anything that's known for its raw attack power. She used something that was very passive. She hoped to whittle them down with poison and then eventually just stall out the game. She used a Stallermon, a tank, against 3 DPSs, essentially. A lot of Marvel Rival / Overwatch quotes today. But that's pretty much the battle. It's not that big of a deal. I think people need to just relax. Obviously, I know this is weeks, almost months after that episode has happened, so it's a non-factor now. But now that I finally get to review the episode, I get to talk about that situation, and honestly, it's not that bad. So, next time we do return, though, we will be covering a couple of episodes. We'll be covering episode 80, we'll be covering episode 81, episode 82, and yeah, we'll be covering those 3 episodes at once. So episode 80, 81, and 82. Those all involve Area Zero. So I definitely want to get to talking about all of them. I hope to see you all next time, everybody. Tyrone TG3 out.